Hello, hello. We are here with another Talk for Bloom 2021, and I'm here with Marie-Eve Gagnon from Slumber Time Solutions, and we are going to be talking about all things sleep, right? It's like every parent's how do we get sleep? So we are delighted to have you here as an expert in that field. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and
Yeah.
what you do?
Yes, I'm very excited to be here. I'm Marie Eve. I'm a mom of two. My kiddos are now 9 and 12, but my daughter, my second, was my non sleeper. So she took us on a journey, and as a result, a sleep journey or non sleep journey, a lack of sleep journey. And then as a result, after that experience, I decided to help other families get the support that I needed at the time. So I got trained and certified as a gentle sleep coach, and I have been helping families for almost 8 years now,
Oh my gosh.
just figuring out sleep.
Okay, so yeah, you are definitely the person to talk to about this precious, precious topic. So, I guess what can you tell us basically how does sleep work? Like, what are the basics of sleep that parents need to know?
Yes. So I think we talk so much about kind of what to do, what not to do, that it's good to take a minute to think about, okay, why do we see the behavior that we see? Why do babies do what they do? Because I think it helps to understand and maybe kind of understand how we respond to that. So we're going to do 2 minutes of sleep 101. So I have
Oh,
three sleep facts that I want to share today. So the first one is that no one sleeps through the night. And I think most of us know this, but the way our bodies sleep as humans is that we wake up every so often throughout the night. So we have these different sort of sleep cycles. And sleep scientists believe it's a survival instinct. So they believe that way back when we were in the cave and we had to keep the fire going, we needed to wake up every so often to sort of make sure we were sort of safe. So it's kind of that survival instinct that every so often adults wake up every 1 to 2 hours and babies wake up even more frequently, but we just kind of check and make sure we're okay. So no one sleeps through the night. Basically, what happens is that when we have these wakings, the question is, do we just go back to sleep or do we stay awake? So if you had a good night of sleep last night, you probably don't remember waking up 3, 4 times. And that's because those were partial arousals. You literally opened one eye, you were safe, and you went back to sleep. We don't remember that. But babies, when they have those wakings, tend to kind of wake up more fully. And that's usually because they have a need. So I probably should backtrack and say, if I wake up and I'm fine, I just go back to sleep. But if I wake up and I need to go pee or, I need water, then I will kind of wake up fully and I have a need that I need to take care of. Now, babies, when they wake up, when they're little, they tend to have more needs
hmm.
during the night. So they have these wakings every so often, but often they actually need something. They're cold, they're wet, they're hungry. So when they have these wakings, usually they fully wake up because they're like, "Hey, I can't go back to sleep. I need some help." So that's sort of that piece, which is basically the difference between, if you have a friend who has a baby who sleeps longer stretches at night versus a baby who tends to wake up more often it's not it's how they manage these wakings. We all wake up, and the question is, do we just go back to sleep, or do we need some help to go back to sleep, or do we need something when we wake
So
up?
you're saying that babies who sleep longer stretches, it's actually those waking moments that the babies are managing.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. So we
Yes.
all wake up, some go back to sleep, and then we think they slept through, they slept longer, and some need more help to go
Right.
back to sleep. But fundamentally, we all have these wakings throughout the night. The wakings don't change; it's how we manage them, or what we can do when we have these wakings that changes.
Okay.
So that's the first thing that to remember is that we all wake up. That's normal, and that babies have lots of needs. So it's common for infants to wake up every couple hours or every 3 hours, right? To need something. The second piece is that you know being able to go back to sleep or being able to go to sleep is actually a, a skill that we have to learn. And so I think about sleep just like I think about rolling or crawling. It's something that at some point you're going to have to practice so that you can learn how to do that. And just like any of those other skills, for some it comes very naturally. Some babies just learn to sleep, and for others it's harder, and we're going to need to kind of eventually kind of guide them and teach them to sleep. So that's sleep fact number 2, is to think about being able to go to sleep and back to sleep on your own, something that we have to learn at some point. And there's a time for that. So often, newborns are not developmentally ready to learn how to do this. Some will do, because naturally that was part of how they are. But for most babies, the first few months are a little bit of that survival period where they kind of need our help. They're not quite ready, just like they're not crawling yet. And so we carry them around. So similarly, we kind of need to help them sleep and go back to sleep. And that's usually the first 4 months. And after 4 months, kiddos are much more developmentally ready to learn to become more independent with their sleep. So that was, once again, sleep fact number 2. It's thinking about sleep as a skill that we need to learn. And then the last thing I want to bring up is to think about how we help our kiddos fall asleep. So the way you help your baby fall asleep sort of impacts their expectations. So sleep associations are created at bedtime. So if you typically, rock or feed or bounce a baby or lay with your kiddo, whatever we do at bedtime, for our kiddos, that becomes sort of their sleep association. And there's a good chance that when they wake up later in the night, that whatever you did at bedtime is what's going to be the most effective way to help them go back to sleep in the middle of the night, because that's what they associate with sleep.
That makes sense.
So that sleep association is just something to think about, is that, okay, if I do this at bedtime, but I don't want to do it in the middle of the night, then sometimes that's a little trickier, because in the middle of the night, they're like, hey, can we do this thing that I used to fall asleep at bedtime?
That makes a lot of sense. And that segues nicely into the next, I guess, two-part question is a little bit about routine and how that works for babies, which is, I think, a little bit of what you were just talking about. And then also the environment, the sleep environment. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about both of those?
Absolutely. So in terms of environment, we want at nighttime, we want the room to be dark. So dark is helps us sleep and go back to sleep. Now, usually we need some light to take care of our babies in the middle of the night, but we want to use ideally a light that's more orange or red versus a light that's white or blue, because those colors, the frequency of those lights affect our own brain in a different way. So orange and red are much more conducive to keeping us sleepy, whereas the white and blue light kind of tends to wake us up. So
it's so interesting, because I feel like so many night lights are kind of a bluish white color.
Which is So I always try to find something that orange, like a salt lamp, like those that color, like that's really sort of what we're kind of looking for. That's a much more, from a sleep perspective, it's a color that keeps us more sleepy in the middle of the night. So dark and those colored light is sort of what we want to do. In terms of environment too, for babies, white noise is really helpful. So, and when I think about white noise, at least for infant, it's not the ocean and it's not the river, it's the like that static kind of noise, like that true white noise. And the reason that is really helpful is because in utero, it's never quiet, right? There's all these kind of sounds and shushing and sort of things. And having that background noise for young babies is actually calming and comforting, because that's what they're used to. Silence is very strange for a newborn, because there was never silence when they were in the mummy's belly.
Yeah, so it's comforting for them, I'm sure, in some ways to have that.
Yeah. So we're talking about light or darkness, white noise. And then the other thing to think about is sort of just temperature, right? Just, we don't want baby to be too cold, but we definitely don't want baby to be too warm, right? So just kind of having that right temperature for kiddos. Often we say like 68 to 72 in terms of room temperature, and kind of dressing up baby appropriately. One thing that, to remember is that babies have cold hands, cold feet, cold nose. And so, but that is not necessarily a reflection or their body temperature. So having cold hand does not mean your baby needs an extra layer. And you need to check their back or check their chest, check their core body parts, to kind of get a feel for, is that hot or is that feel cold or does it feel just nice? And they're probably good.
Okay.
So that's the environment. So we want it dark. We want some white noise, and we want to make sure that our kiddos are not too hot in there. Routine. There's lots of research on bedtime routine, on routines for kiddos, that show that families who have a consistent bedtime routine have kiddos who sleep better and longer. So that time that we spend sort of during that routine every night is really an investment, because typically that means that kiddos will fall asleep faster and sleep better. And basically a routine doesn't have to be fancy, but it's like two, three, four things that you're willing to do every night in the same order. And a routine will change over time as your child grows, but the concept is the same. It's something that we keep doing, as my 12-year-old has a routine, right? Like that still goes on, but obviously it evolves. For a baby, it could be something like we go to the bedroom, we change a diaper, we feed, we swaddle, we sing a song, right? And that could be a routine. The idea is that we do the same steps in the same order, the same steps in the same order every night. So to have sort of that consistency. It could be a massage, it could be a bath, it could be praying, it could be reading books, it can be kind of saying goodbye to some objects, kind of a good night mood type, thing. Whatever it is that you enjoy, but we want to pick a few things and kind of do those things every night.
And that gets the baby sort of in the zone as it is.
Exactly. So, kiddos are amazing, and they start to understand this routine, right? This sequence, and they know that at the end of this sequence, it's the long sleep, right? Like it's nighttime, it's going to be time to sleep, and it's that long time. So that's something that we can start as early as like 8 weeks, 8 weeks old, and wow. our bedtime routine. And yeah, that's something that will continue for years.
Does that mean that at 2 weeks, it's not that important? Like, does research show that maybe routine isn't that effective at 2 weeks?
Yeah. So
doesn't mean you can't do it, but just
right. Yes, you definitely can do it any time. But sometimes the patterns are so inconsistent. The first couple of weeks.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
What?
Right.
That sometimes, like in terms of putting pressure on parents, of like, oh my gosh, you didn't sing the song, right? So that, from that perspective, there's obviously you can do a routine all the time, but in terms of putting it sort of more like as parents, like gets to do that, typically, once again, there's a little bit more, we get into a bit more of a rhythm. And yes, from a development perspective, it starts to be more, they kind of get it, takes them a little bit to kind of figure it out. So yeah, you can start anytime, but.
So yeah, all new parents, 8 weeks, put it in your calendar, start the routine.
Exactly.
No, it's obviously not like that, but it's funny because that last bit you just mentioned, you get into a rhythm, but I was curious about babies' sleep rhythm in general. Maybe not, because I know it's also over the course of the day as well, that their sleep pattern matters. So yes. What can you tell us about that? Especially, those early weeks or so, I don't know if there's even a pattern sometimes, a little bit more unpredictable.
So we definitely don't have a schedule in those first few months, right? So we don't have a schedule like we nap at 9 and at noon and at 3, right? There is no schedule in the first few 2-3 months kind of thing. What we do have, though, is our kiddos' rhythm. So we have an internal clock called the circadian rhythm, and we want to be in sync with that rhythm. So if we can start to kind of get a feel for what's going on and when is our child tired, and we can kind of offer sleep at sort of the right time, meaning when they're naturally tired, it helps a lot. And it's surprising how short these windows are. So basically, newborns have very short windows, meaning they cannot be awake for a very long time. And that might be just like 60 minutes, right. Like the 0 to 6 weeks kind of thing. So by the time baby wakes up and you change them and you feed them, like you may literally have like 12 minutes to hang out before like they're tired again kind of thing. And then the cycles just, start again. So those windows tend to be pretty short at first. And then over time, those windows become longer. So 6 weeks might be 90 minutes, and 4 months, 2 hours, and 6 months, 3 hours, right? Those windows of how long they can stay up will become longer, but they're pretty short at first. And the idea is that if we, once again, can kind of get into that rhythm for them, it really helps, because when we miss that window and we keep them up too long, it's usually harder for them to sleep. And that's something that's fairly counterintuitive because you would think that if you stayed up for longer, you're extra tired, so you're just going to sleep better. But sadly, that is not how our bodies work, at least for children. And so
Well, I
often
think adults can relate to that too,
right, a
because
little
I know
bit.
that, if you get overtired, sometimes it is hard to go to sleep.
Right. Yes. But sometimes we can catch up, but baby kiddos don't, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
So
well, yeah.
this idea of like, if you keep them up too long, often you get less sleep, as a result of
Right.
a later bedtime. So kind of keeping an eye on those windows can really actually make a difference in the first, just kind of getting in that rhythm. Some babies are really kind and give us cues that they're tired. Like some babies will rub their eyes or just start to look tired or look away, right? They'll kind of give us cues that like, hey, I'm getting to the end of this window, I need to sleep. And so some babies, we can kind of wait for them to show us their cues. We can kind of rely on them. But some babies don't. Some babies are very alert, kind of those FOMO babies. And for those, sometimes it's like, well, it's been 4 hours, and you have not looked tired yet. And there's no way your body could stay up that long. And so those babies, we may need to initiate kind of like, it's been, an hour or an hour and a half. Let's get you a nap. Here we go.
So do you recommend parents like write it all down or track it? I'm guessing there's like apps out there to track that sort of thing.
There's all sorts of apps. But in general, like once again, we don't have a schedule per se. But if you start to get into the rhythm of like, 90 minutes works great for my child. I like to put the alarm. Like you woke up at 10 a.m. from your nap. I'm going to put an alarm for 11:30 because can't remember, but then at 11:30 when that alarm goes, you can kind of get a feel like, are you looking tired, or but you can kind of have that reminder.
Smart.
And once again, we don't have a schedule, but that's basically what it's like, okay, you woke up from this nap at 10 a.m. I know that I have this time, and chances are around 11:30 in this example, you're likely going to be tired again.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so well, I feel kind of funny. It's like a very broad question, but just sort of, how do parents get their babies to sleep ultimately? This is all sort of like prepping and getting it situated. So then what's the
what
next?
do we actually do?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. And some of that sometimes feels sort of, easy and natural. And sometimes you're not sure how to do this. So in terms of actually helping kind of newborn sleep, there's a couple tips that I'd like to kind of share. So first is I'm a big fan of Dr. Karp's 5S. So Dr. Karp wrote a book called The Happiest Baby on the Block. He also has a website, and on the website there's actually a video. It's about a 40-minute video, which is actually better than the book because you see him do sort of his techniques. But basically he talks about these 5 techniques to help babies kind of calm, and they include swaddling, putting babies on their side, shushing, sucking, and swinging sort of movement. So basically, and if you think about it, like those are definitely like the family, like the kind of things that we do naturally to help babies sleep. Like we rock, right? We tend to move, or we hold them, and so those 5S are definitely what we want to start with. Just typically, start with one or the other and see kind of what your baby's kind of like. And sometimes you have to do them all to kind of help them fall asleep. So that's definitely one, once again, an idea, a way of how we have babies kind of fall asleep. The other thing I want to kind of talk about is then baby is asleep and baby wake up sort of in the middle of the night. And you can we know we're going to need to kind of respond to babies and help them. And so the way to think about what do I do when baby wakes up like that is I think about that support as a ladder. So baby wake up, what do I do? First, I want to offer the least amount of support that they need. So maybe I just shush a little bit. If that's not enough, then I put my hand on them, put a little pressure on their chest. If that's not enough, then maybe I rock them a little bit, on their mattress. If that's not enough, then I pick them up. So I think about sort of the different things that I can do to help babies as sort of this ladder. And I start with the least amount of support, because if just a little shushing is enough, then that's great. I didn't have to get out of bed. I didn't move baby. Like we're good, right? So we don't need to offer or top, the most support if just a little bit of support was enough. But I would just kind of think about it just in that ladder. Start with a little bit, give it 20 seconds, and if not, like just keep offering more help. And typically, as we offer more help, holding, rocking, feeding, those would be the things that typically are kind of the more support to help go back to sleep. And you may need at times to get to the top of your ladder. But the idea is to start at the bottom of the ladder, because if you don't need to offer a full feeding, just a little shushing work, then that was faster for everybody.
Yeah, you don't want to pull out all the stops all at once and
Right.
then be like, oh no, still not asleep either.
Right.
So that's kind of a nice way to visually think about it.
Yeah, kind of thinking about that. And then one more thing to think about is to actually pause when baby need, you hear baby, whether it's, yeah, let's say in the middle of the night or anytime, like just to kind of pause for a little bit and just be like, what is baby saying? Because especially in the middle of the night, sometimes kiddos are loud and they're totally asleep. And then we
Mhm.
actually intervene and
Yes.
disturb what was going on. And so this idea of like pausing, like just wait a second, listen, look, observe what's going on, and then assess like, yep, they're awake, they need some help. Or I'm just gonna, just, and so kind of this idea of taking a second, like taking, a few seconds to sort of assess what is actually going, and then of course responding when they need to. But there are times where if you give them that 20 seconds, they're back to sleep, and we they didn't need us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important thing to keep in mind too, especially as they're like learning that self-soothing
Yes.
ability, kind of coming in and out of the sleep, like you said, we do as adults without realizing
Right.
it. Okay, so we won't have time today to talk about when parents are struggling, which hopefully we can have you back sometime and talk about all of that. Some of the difficulties that they might encounter in what is admittedly a complicated part of parenthood, right?
Yes.
But I know that you help people when they run into those kinds of difficulties. So, can you share with us what you do when a parent contacts you, how they can contact you, and
Yeah.
what that might look like?
Yeah. So it depends on, once again, the age of the kiddos, right? So I work with families with kiddos 0 to 10 years old. So obviously, it definitely varies. But basically, usually a family reach out because what's going on with sleep is not working anymore. There's many ways to sleep, and as long as it's working for everyone, then it's working for your family. But typically, at some point, something's going on, and it feels like it's not working anymore. It's not sustainable. It's not, yeah, it feels like it's time for a change. And so depending on where we are, where we want to go, and obviously the age of the child, then we kind of come up with different strategies. So I work one-on-one with families, offering consultation and follow-up support. I also have a group membership where we kind of do it sort of more as a group and weekly kind of Q&A. I also have a class that I teach, or couple classes that I teach. One is live, one is more of an online course. So whether it is time for a kiddo to learn to sleep more independently, whether it's time to eliminate night feedings or transitioning to a different room, siblings coming, nightmares, anxiety in older kiddos, all of that are things that I support families kind of manage and navigate.
And so, how can they find you if they want to reach out to you and they find
Yeah,
themselves in that
the
position?
best way is probably the website. So, slumbertimesolutions.com. Often, like the best way is to book an initial sleep assessment call. Basically, it's a 50-minute free call where we get on the phone and we kind of talk about what's going on and what change you would like to see, and what are some options that are there that we could work together to help kind of make those changes for your family.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to share with people who are just maybe starting out on this sleep journey with their kiddos?
um Ask for help too, if and I'm happy to help, but this is especially in the first few months, that's a good time to get some support. So whether it's family or friends, a doula, there's some professionals that can help. That And it's not always going to be like that, right? So kiddos will grow, change, and it's sleep's going to evolve, and it's going to be a lot easier soon. So if it's hard at first, just know that it's a phase. and get some support. Take care of you. We need parents to be well so that they can, care for their kiddos. And yeah, just reach out.
Yeah, that's a good reminder because when you're in the trenches, sometimes it feels like you're just going to be stuck in those trenches
Oh,
for
yes.
a very long time. But
Right.
yeah, it's always good to reach out and know that things will change eventually,
Yes.
and get some help if you can in the interim. So yeah,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your expertise with us. We'll make sure everybody knows where to find you, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much. It was lovely. It was fun. Bye bye.
Bye.